So for this section, if you're running a lab or research-based event, you can watch this part. If you're running an engineering event, which is a pre-build event, you do not have to watch this piece. So for lab and research-based events, these are events in which students either bring in materials, a binder, you have prepared a test for them, or you've prepared a lab for them. This is the section that you'll focus on. First of all, make sure that you write your items, your questions, or your activities that are aligned to the rules. Make sure you've got the most recent copy of the rules. Those rules, as I mentioned earlier, are available on our website in a password-protected section. You'll download those rules and then use those rules to make the event. So we have got probably the biggest complaint that we get over the years is when an event supervisor doesn't follow the most recent set of rules in defining what the students will be doing for the activity. Make sure that when you're doing this, you're going to create several levels of items. Now, it's important that no one gets a 100% and no one gets a 0%, because in that environment, if you have 2 or 3 students or teams that get a 100%, then we have no way of breaking the ties. And the same thing for a 0%. If we get several teams that have 0%, we have no way of breaking the ties. So you want to design this so that you sort of spread the achievement over a very large number of points. So what I've had in the past, for example, is I'll have, let's say, picture this, which is an event, and they'll have 10 pictures that are done. Well, with only 10 pictures, but we've got 42 teams, that means it automatically sets up ties. So if you have a 25 question test, there will immediately be ties by the sheer fact that there's only 25 points. So with 42 teams, you want to probably have a 100-point test. So it could be, there's 10 questions, but each of those questions have got individual subparts, and then you can break up the points. You want to make sure that you do sort of easy questions, medium questions, and very, very difficult questions that almost no one could answer except for the best, brightest students. You also want to, from the very beginning, have a system for breaking the ties. And so you want to announce this. Now, it could be that you're going to have pre-designated questions for breaking the ties, but make sure you announce this to the teams on how you will determine the tiebreaker. So again, mentioned that already. Make sure you have a system for breaking the ties and announce this and post it for the teams. If you are going to have an event in which there's an essay, you want to first write the essay question and then write out what the ideal answer is to that question, and then identify factors. So this is, you're really making a rubric that would make it ideal, and then the number of points that will make it ideal, and then you'll sort of back up from that. The biggest mistake that would be had here is that you make an essay, you don't write out the answer, and you don't identify ahead of time how many points the different factors for the answer will be for the students, and then you're trying to guess it. So what we want is consistency from the first hour to the last hour of the competition. And you also have a group of people that will be scoring, so they need to make sure that you're all internally consistent in the way that you score. So you do that by really creating a rubric for this. Now, that said, I really want to steer you away from essays because they also take longer to grade. Short essays might be fine, maybe 1 or 2, but we have to make sure that we get the events completed and scored within 2 hours after the final hour ends, so that we can run you through score counseling and we can start the awards ceremony. Ideally, we want to start the awards ceremony as soon as possible. So for calculations, if you got a test that you're going to have students calculating things, then you will have a question, for example, and let's say they are going to find the force given the mass and acceleration, or let's say they're measuring a lab. Let's say there's a lab where they've determined the mass, they've calculated the acceleration, and they've got to then calculate the force. Well, there's error that's built in to any kind of measurement that you have to take. So how do you take this into consideration? Well, if you want to account for error, you might say, Let's say if it's done perfectly, the answer is 56.7 newtons. So you might say, well, anything with between 58 and 55 counts for full points. So we've designated full points as 5 points. Beyond that, outside of 58, outside of 55, so out to the margins of 61 and 52, then they get 3 points. And if they're out beyond 61 and 52, then they get 0 points. So this is a scoring rubric that will allow you to take into account error in measurement, especially in our lab-based events. So when you're designing a lab-based event, be very clear and concise about what you want the students to do, and don't do any tricky questions. I really would like it to be as hands-on as possible. And then on all of your answer sheets, worksheets, whatever you're doing, make sure there's a space for their names and the team numbers. Now, what I encourage you to do is also have maybe a test sheet, and then have an answer sheet that's separate. So if you have a 10-page test sheet, we only have to make, a few copies of that, but then we'll have the answer sheet, and then that will also make it a little bit easier to grade, but it'll also reduce the amount of printing that we need to do. Okay, so your